is a war. It's happening now. It will decide the fate of humanity. The time to choose sides has come. We are the resistance. We are the InfoWar.
Welcome to the InfoWars Nightly News. It is Friday, September 26, 2014, and I'm Leanne McAdoo. Here's tonight's top stories.
Tonight, the CIA admits to destroying the career of a prominent journalist. Then, a domestic beheading prompts concerns of terrorism. And the DHS are now the Green Police. That's next on the InfoWars Nightly News.
4 or 5 years ago, they had it as the ad. The Green Police, we're coming after you.
The FBI is looking into a beheading that took place in Oklahoma yesterday. They're trying to investigate and see if there are any ties to the Islamic State. A man there was fired from an Oklahoma food processing plant. He beheaded a woman with a knife and was attacking another worker when he was shot and wounded by a company official. Police are waiting until the 30-year-old man is conscious to arrest him in Thursday's attack, and they have asked the FBI to help investigate after co-workers at Vaughn Foods told authorities that he had recently started trying to convert several employees to Islam. Now, you'll recall that it was just this Sunday when ISIS put out the call for jihadis in America to take action to behead Americans here, make us feel unsafe in our homes. And of course, now the FBI is being called in to investigate if this person has any ties to the Islamic State. He's probably, just someone who's crazy and trying to tie himself into this extremist group. But of course, they have been putting out the call to commit these acts of atrocity here in the United States. One such place is New York City. Now, they have warned on multiple occasions that they will carry out an attack. Officials there are now scrambling to reassure the city that it is safe to ride the subway and travel the streets. This is following a warning by Iraq's prime minister that Islamist militants have planned to attack the city. Now, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio each had the same idea. They wanted to take a subway ride to a busy transit hub to announce that everything was under control. De Blasio said at a hastily arranged news conference at Manhattan's Union Square, "There is no immediate credible threat to our subway system." And just down the road, Governor Cuomo said, "You are going to see a greater police presence than you have seen before. Don't be alarmed. If anything, that should be comforting." And uniformed officers, several with explosive sniffing dogs, were stationed every few hundred yards, and there were tables set up to conduct random bag searches. So here they're both saying there is no credible threat. It's an unsubstantiated threat, but they are going to be ramping up the police presence nevertheless for your safety. Now, once again, no one is talking about the very credible threat of having a wide open border where anyone can come through. But of course, they want to use the threat of ISIS to continue to further take away your rights. This is what they're going to be using ISIS for. Now, after launching these strikes inside the sovereign nation of Syria earlier this week, the Pentagon said that it was legal because it was striking against an imminent al-Qaeda threat. And of course, that's legal under a 2001 authorization of military force that they can use against those nations, organizations, or persons that were involved in the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks. Well, now the FBI and the Pentagon, they said today, they don't really know how exactly close that threat was from the Khorasan group. So the Pentagon spokesman, Rear Admiral John Kirby, said, "I don't know that we can pin that down to a day or a month or a week or 6 months. It doesn't matter. I mean, so we can have this debate about whether it was valid to hit them or not, or whether it was too soon or too late. We hit them. And I don't think, that we need to throw up a dossier here to prove that these are bad dudes." Now, no one is really arguing about that, if these are bad dudes and if it was, bad that we strike them. I mean, it probably would have made a lot more sense for us to hit them when they were in a convenient convoy. But of course, we waited until there was an imminent threat, or in this case, maybe there really wasn't an imminent threat. The issue here is that they used this to justify unauthorized airstrikes in a sovereign nation. That is the issue, but they want to push that aside and say, hey, you know, whatever, they were bad, we hit them. Once again, nobody really plays by any rules. What do we have a constitution for? Now, Reuters is reporting that U.S.-led strikes are now pressuring al-Qaeda's affiliate in Syria, the Nusra Front, to reconcile with its Islamic State rivals and confront a common enemy. They say that the two share ideology and rigid Islamic beliefs, but they fell out during a power struggle between the two groups' leaders. Now, these U.S.-led air and missile strikes, which have hit Nusra as well as Islamic State bases in Syria, have angered many Nusra members who say the West and its allies have joined forces in a crusader campaign against Islam. Sources close to the Islamic State said some Nusra fighters were joining them after the strikes, and there was a growing sense among many that it was time to put their differences aside. But wait a minute, because we already reported on this merger back in June, and we've been talking about how a lot of these forces have been joining the Islamic State, giving them weapons. They are the power there in that region. This was our article. It said ISIS and al-Nusra merge on Syria-Iraq border. Saudi-funded and U.S.-trained caliphate army gains 15,000 jihadist fighters. So, of course, why is this relevant? Because the U.S. and its allies are arming the Syrian rebel groups. They're so-called friendly rebels, the moderate rebels. They've given them millions in cash. We just authorized $500 million more in weapons and training. And, of course, these are rebel groups who have admitted that they are working with ISIS. So basically here again, now Reuters is confirming this once again. And like we mentioned, these attacks are just going to further push this anti-American sentiment in the region. Now Nusra is coming out and saying that, yeah, we're probably going to go ahead and link up with ISIS as well. They had, prior to this, been focusing all of their attention on taking down Assad. Now, the U.S. military today has unveiled a new policy. They are going to be allowing undocumented immigrants to join the U.S. military. Now, these new rules will expand an existing program. It allows recruiters to target foreign nationals with high demand skills, mostly rare foreign language expertise, or specialized healthcare training. Now, this is the program. It's known as Military Accessions in the National Interest, or MAVNI. It'll be open to immigrants without a proper visa if they came to the U.S. with their parents before age 16. They say they're going to cap the recruits at $1,500 per year. Now, flashback to just earlier this year when it was announced that nearly 30,000 U.S. soldiers were going to be removed from active duty in accordance with the military drawdown. So no jobs for U.S. soldiers, but bringing in these undocumented immigrants. Now, budget projections indicate the Army will end fiscal year 2014 with 510,000 soldiers. The active component is slated to hit 490,000 by the end of 2015. And if lawmakers don't ease the threat of further cuts, the active component could reach 420,000 by the end of the decade. So almost 100,000 less soldiers on active duty, according to Pentagon sources. So it's kind of an affront that they are now actively recruiting undocumented immigrants and allowing 1,500 to come in, saying that they are looking for foreign nationals with high demand skills, when we've already proven that there is not a lack of highly skilled people here in the U.S. that are ready and willing to work and to serve. Now, what can all of these soldiers do that are going to be relieved from active duty? Well, there's always a job for them over at the Green Police. That's right. What started as sort of a joke commercial to get people to recycle, the Green Police, it could soon become a reality because the Department of Homeland Security has announced that they're going to be shifting their focus off of fighting terrorists to protecting America's cities from climate change. That's right. They say increasingly we've moved not only from a security focus to a resiliency focus. And it's not about securing the nation from terrorists, of course, coming through these wide open borders. No, now they're going to be using drones to make sure that you're not watering your lawn on an off day, or, charging you a fine for throwing away too much food waste, like they've already started to do in Seattle. They're fining people who throw away too much food and don't compost. Now, initially, they're going to have a team of specialists, including city planners, who are going to develop better tools for planning. For instance, Portland, Maine, they're going to look at terms of risks from rising sea level, and of course, once salt water merges with fresh water, how they're going to mitigate floods. But here's the thing. They point out how California derives about $1 billion annually from their cap and trade program. Now, this is a program that sells greenhouse gas emissions permits. They make about $1 billion from this. Well, the state has decided that all that revenue must be spent in ways linked to resilience. And as you recall from any of our Agenda 21 reports, resilience is another name for Agenda 21. It's something that they're selling as this positive, but of course, now they're going to make all states put their cap and trade emissions programs funds into their Agenda 21 program. Now, as the World Health Organization has been reporting that there could be 1.4 million new cases of Ebola by January if the condition isn't controlled, the U.S., of course, has sent troops to the region to try and contain this disease. Some outlets are reporting that up to 2 million people are being quarantined. And of course, we've said that they're there to not only help mitigate this and quarantine and set up these medical facilities, but also military bases. Well, things just got a whole lot more difficult. Liberia's largest newspaper has come out accusing the U.S. of manufacturing Ebola and the AIDS virus. This article was written by Dr. Cyril Broderick, and Broderick addresses this letter to dear world citizens. Broderick mentions that because of the widespread loss of life, fear, physiological trauma, and despair among Liberians and other West African citizens, it is incumbent that I make a contribution to the resolution of this devastating situation, which may continue to recur if it is not properly and adequately confronted. Broderick goes on to address the situation in 5 points, pointing out first, Ebola is a genetically modified organism, a GMO. And Broderick quotes a text from an article called Emerging Viruses, AIDS and Ebola, Nature, Accident, or Intentional, and points out how in the early 1970s, the war was between countries that hosted the KGB and the CIA, and that the manufacture of AIDS-like viruses was clearly directed at the other. And goes on to say how an American military medical industry that conducts these biological weapons tests under the guise of administering vaccinations to control diseases and improve the health of Black Africans overseas. Now, we've mentioned this many times before. It goes on to mention and point out all of the secret testing that's taking place in Africa, quoting John Rappaport's August 2nd article titled, West Africa, What Are U.S. Biological Warfare Researchers Doing in the Ebola Zone? They point out all the sites around Africa and in West Africa that have been set up for testing these emergency diseases, especially Ebola. And then Broderick calls for the need for legal action for damages that have been incurred from all of this testing, calling on African leaders to take a stand and stop allowing the citizens of Africa to be used as guinea pigs. So is this far-fetched? Here we have the largest newspaper in Liberia coming out and saying this, quoting these articles, giving you examples of bases that have been set up where they're conducting these tests. We know that the government, under the control of the globalists, has time and again conducted these experiments on minorities. There's the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. We know that they have run mass-scale sterilization campaigns via vaccination on women and children in South and Central America and Mexico. And of course, we get into it extensively in Endgame about race-specific bioweapons. Here's a clip.
The elite have left a massive wave of destruction behind.